$381 million. That's how much was illegally built on my grandfather's land. 847 massive homes on 1,300 acres that have belonged to my family since 1952. While the HOA president pocketed every cent of rent for 15 straight years, my grandfather died thinking we'd lost everything. Then one day she struts up in her designer heels and spits, "Get that trashy truck off my mountain before I call the cops on you, white trash." She had no idea she was standing on land I now own, including the house she lives in. But when I found that old 1952 contract in his safe, one hidden clause changed everything. This is the sweetest revenge on a greedy Karen who's about to lose it all. I'm Cole Brennan, and this is how I discovered I owned an entire subdivision, and made the HOA president who terrorized my family pay for every stolen dollar. 3 days after my grandfather Ezra passed away, I maxed out my credit card to drive 12 hours from Ohio to settle his estate. I'm a mechanic, calloused hands, oil under my fingernails, behind on rent for 3 months. Figured I'd inherit his old cabin, sell it quick to pay for his funeral, and maybe keep the lights on another month. My family had been broke for as long as I could remember. Dad always said Grandpa made poor choices with money. We'd grown up hearing stories about how he'd wasted the family fortune on worthless mountain land instead of investing in something practical. The smell of pine sap and old leather hit me when I walked into that cabin. Everything felt frozen in time. His coffee mug still on the kitchen table. Reading glasses folded next to hand-drawn surveyor maps from the 1940s. See, Grandpa Ezra was the original surveyor for this area. Bought 1,300 acres of pure Colorado wilderness for $3,200 in 1952 when it was nothing but pine trees and elk trails. The family always joked he got the worthless land while smart investors bought downtown plots. Turns out the joke was on all of us. I was sorting through his papers, old receipts, faded photographs, engineering notes, when I heard the crunch of gravel outside. Then came the click-click-click of designer heels marching up my driveway like a metronome of pure entitlement. "Excuse me, sir." The voice had this ridiculous fake British accent. I looked up to see a woman in her 50s with perfectly styled blonde hair, oversized sunglasses, and an $80,000 Range Rover that probably cost more than I'd make in 3 years. "I'm Brenda Kensington Walsh, president of the Pinnacle Ridge Homeowners Association." She scratched her acrylic nails against a clipboard loaded with official-looking forms. "This community has standards. That eyesore truck needs removal immediately. We simply cannot have 847 homeowners' property values affected by this situation. 847 families. I filed that number away for later. My husband Dennis works for the county assessor's office," she added with a smug smile. "We know exactly what this property is assessed at, which frankly isn't much compared to our community standards." What she didn't know, what nobody in this whole damn neighborhood knew, was that every single one of those pristine McMansions was sitting on land my family had owned since 1952. "I'll handle the truck situation," I said simply. She handed me an official-looking paper with the HOA seal. "You have 72 hours to comply or face $500 in daily fines. Welcome to Pinnacle Ridge, Mr. Brennan." Cole Brennan. "Well, Mr. Brennan, I do hope you'll fit in better than your grandfather did." As her Range Rover purred away down the mountain road, I stood there holding that violation notice. I thought about those 847 families, about what they'd say when they found out who really owned their mountain paradise. Time to find Grandpa's hidden safe and see what secrets he'd been keeping. The next morning I woke up to flashing red and blue lights. 2 sheriff's deputies stood on my porch at 6 a.m. Behind them, Brenda sat in her Range Rover with a satisfied smirk. "Mr. Brennan, we have a restraining order here. Ma'am says you threatened her yesterday." I told her I'd handle the truck situation. "That's threatening?" Deputy Martinez looked embarrassed. "Sir, she's also filed a complaint claiming you don't have legal right to be on this property. Says there's some kind of ownership dispute." "Officers, I inherited this place 3 days ago. I've got the death certificate and deed paperwork inside." After the deputies left, I drove into town. The Pine Ridge Public Library sat on Main Street like something out of a Norman Rockwell painting. Inside, I met Mrs. Opal Cartwright, the librarian who'd apparently been there since the Eisenhower administration. "You're Ezra's grandson," she said before I even introduced myself. "Heard about the trouble with that Kensington Walsh woman. Your grandfather was a good man. That woman made his last years hell." What we found in those yellowed file folders made my hands shake with anger. Starting in 2005, the assessed value of my grandfather's land had been mysteriously lowered from $2.8 million to just $180,000. Every year, Dennis Walsh had signed off on keeping it artificially undervalued. "This is fraud," Mrs. Opal whispered. "Plain and simple." By noon, I'd called Janet Torres, a property attorney in Denver who specialized in land disputes. "Mr. Brennan, you need to file what's called a quiet title lawsuit immediately. Given what you've described, we have grounds to challenge every property transfer in that subdivision." While I was building my legal case, Brenda was busy with her own warfare. She'd created a Facebook group called Protect Pinnacle Ridge from Undesirable Elements, posting Ring doorbell footage of me performing highly suspicious activities, like checking my mailbox and walking to my truck. But Brenda had made one crucial mistake. While she was playing Facebook Warrior, she'd revealed the scope of their operation. Dennis's involvement meant this wasn't just stolen rent money. This was systematic document fraud involving county officials. 3 days later, Brenda called an emergency HOA meeting. According to my source Margaret Flynn, a retired teacher, Brenda had worked herself into a complete frenzy. She kept pacing back and forth like a caged animal, Margaret told me over coffee, talking about undesirable elements and protecting our investment. Then she called for an official vote declaring your cabin a public nuisance. Only 12 homeowners had shown up out of 847, but Brenda declared it a mandate anyway. "Here's the real kicker," Margaret continued. She announced a new monthly security fee, $200 per household to hire private patrol guards. Said it was necessary because of recent security threats. $200 times 847 homes meant another $169,400 monthly flowing straight into Brenda's bank account. That afternoon, I decided to take a walk around my property lines with trail cameras. As I mounted the first camera, I heard a dump truck approaching. Dennis Walsh was behind the wheel, backing up to dump construction debris right onto my property. I stayed hidden, letting my new camera capture everything. But I had bigger news when Buck Martinez, who owned the hardware store in town, stopped by my cabin. "Son, you need to know what that woman's been doing to local businesses," he said. "She's been making donation requests from every shop on Main Street. Anyone who doesn't pay up suddenly gets mysterious building code violations." That's when I remembered something crucial. Property owners control easements, the legal rights that allow people to cross their land. "Buck, how many of these houses use the main mountain road to access their properties?" His eyes lit up. "Son, that road cuts right through the heart of your grandfather's original property. Every single house in Pinnacle Ridge depends on it." That evening, I spread grandfather's surveyor maps across the kitchen table. The main access road ran directly across land that had belonged to my family for 70 years. I didn't just own the land under their houses. I controlled their only escape route. The next morning, Brenda made her boldest move yet. She showed up at my door with a manila folder and expensive legal counsel, a man in a $1,000 suit. "Mr. Brennan," Brenda announced, "we've come to resolve this unfortunate misunderstanding once and for all." She handed me a document. "This is the original 1955 land agreement between your grandfather and the previous HOA president. It clearly states that Ezra Brennan sold all development rights to the Pinnacle Ridge Community Association in perpetuity." I studied the yellowed paper, noting the official-looking stamps. At first glance, it seemed legitimate, until my mechanics eye caught something. "This is interesting," I said slowly. "My grandfather's signature looks remarkably similar to his 1970s handwriting style, not his 1950s penmanship." The lawyer cleared his throat nervously. "Mr. Brennan, document analysis can be tricky. And why does this 1955 document mention zip codes when they weren't invented until 1963? The look that passed between Brenda and her lawyer was priceless. That afternoon, I drove the document to Janet Torres's office. She took one look and started laughing. "Cole, this is the most amateurish forgery I've seen in 20 years. Wrong paper stock for the 1950s. Modern ballpoint pen ink. But this level of sophistication suggests they've done this before. I'm calling the FBI immediately." Within 48 hours, Special Agent Sarah Kim was sitting in my cabin. "Mr. Brennan, we've been tracking a pattern of real estate fraud across 3 Colorado counties. Your Mrs. Kensington Walsh matches the profile of someone we've been investigating under multiple aliases. The revelation hit like a sledgehammer. Multiple aliases. 5 years ago, she was Brenda Simpson in Grand Junction running an identical scam. Before that, Brenda Morrison in Durango. Always the same pattern: forge historical documents, manipulate county records, steal lease payments from vulnerable families. That evening, I finally found grandfather's hidden safe behind a false panel in his bedroom closet. The combination clicked into place with satisfying precision. Inside, wrapped in oiled leather, were the real contracts, the actual 1952 surveyor agreement, legitimate lease documents, and most importantly, the 99-year land lease agreement that had quietly expired in 2020. But the real revelation was in grandfather's handwritten notes tucked between the official papers. 15 years of documented harassment, theft, and intimidation. Names, dates, amount stolen. The most heartbreaking entry was dated just 2 months before his death. "They think they've broken me. Made me believe I'm just a crazy old man. But I've kept records of everything. Someday someone will make this right." My hands shook as I read his final note. The reversion clause activates if lease payments are interrupted for more than 60 consecutive days. All improvements become property of the landowner. Since no legitimate payments had been made since 2005, every house in Pinnacle Ridge legally belonged to me. I called Janet Torres at 7 a.m. the next morning. "Janet, I need you to explain something. What exactly is a reversion clause?" Her voice was sharp. "Where did you find that term?" "In my grandfather's original 1952 contract. It says all improvements revert to the landowner if lease payments are interrupted for more than 60 days. The silence lasted so long I thought the call had dropped. "Cole," she finally said, barely above a whisper, "are you telling me there's an active reversion clause in the original surveyor agreement?" "That's exactly what I'm telling you. And according to grandfather's notes, no legitimate lease payments have been made since 2005. Jesus Christ, Cole. Under Colorado law, when a property lease is systematically violated for years, all improvements constructed during that time become the property of the landowner. We're not just talking about the land under their houses, we're talking about the actual houses themselves." I walked out onto the porch. 847 homes with an average value of $450,000 each. The math was absolutely staggering. $381 million in real estate that legally belonged to me. So you're saying I literally own their houses? Theoretically, you could evict every single family immediately without compensation. It would be the largest residential seizure in Colorado history. The nuclear option. I could obliterate Brenda's entire kingdom with one legal filing. But as I watched a yellow school bus pick up kids at the corner, I realized that wasn't the man my grandfather had raised me to be. "There's another approach," Janet continued. "We could use the reversion clause as leverage. File the claim, but offer reasonable purchase terms to legitimate homeowners. Force out the bad actors while protecting innocent families." That's when it hit me. This wasn't about maximum revenge. It was about maximum justice. The next morning, I filed the paperwork that would change everything. The legal document claimed ownership of all improvements on my 1,300 acres, giving every resident 30 days to prove their right to remain. Within hours, news vans were parked along the mountain road. By evening, my quiet inheritance had become the lead story on Denver's evening news. That evening I started making house calls, not to Brenda's allies, but to the families who'd been victimized by her schemes. Margaret Flynn was first. "Cole, honey, come in." "Margaret, I want you to know something. This isn't about hurting innocent people. I'm offering legitimate purchase options. Fair market value for your lot with 10-year payment plans at low interest." The relief in her eyes was immediate. "You mean we can stay?" "Not only can you stay, but you'll finally own your land free and clear. No more HOA fees. No more fake security charges." I spent the weekend visiting 43 families, explaining the same offer. The sound of grateful tears and relieved laughter followed me from house to house. Meanwhile, Brenda was getting desperate. Through Margaret, I'd started spreading rumors that I was desperate for a quick settlement and overwhelmed by the legal complexity. Within days, Brenda called to schedule a private negotiation. She thought she was about to prey on another overwhelmed family member. Instead, she was walking into the most comprehensive legal trap I could design. Brenda took the bait. She showed up at my door looking like she hadn't slept in weeks. Mr. Brennan, I believe we got off on the wrong foot. Perhaps we could discuss a mutually beneficial arrangement. I invited her onto the porch, making sure my hidden recorder was running. What did you have in mind? Well, I've spoken with some investors in Denver. They're prepared to offer you $500,000 for a quick resolution. $500,000 for property worth $381 million. The audacity was breathtaking. After she left, I immediately called Agent Kim to report the attempted bribery. But Brenda's desperation was just getting started. That night, I was jolted awake by the sound of diesel engines. Through my security cameras, I watched a crew attempting to damage my cabin's foundation, trying to make it look like a utility emergency. One of the workers answered his cell phone. Yeah, Mrs. Walsh, we're working on it now. Should look like a gas line leak caused the damage. Insurance fraud, destruction of property, and criminal conspiracy, all captured in high-definition video. The breaking point came when they arrested Brenda at Denver International Airport. Agent Kim called me at 6 a.m., Mr. Brennan, your Mrs. Walsh was caught trying to board a flight to Costa Rica with $847,000 in cash from HOA accounts. $847,000. Almost exactly $1,000 per house. By noon, news vans were lined up along the mountain road. The story of an HOA president stealing millions and getting caught fleeing the country was cable news gold. That evening, I called a town hall meeting at the community center. 300 people packed into a space designed for half that number. Ladies and gentlemen, I began, stepping up to the microphone. 3 weeks ago, I inherited my grandfather's property. What I discovered changed everything. I clicked to the first slide showing Brenda's Range Rover, designer clothes, expensive vacations, all funded by theft. That's when the back doors burst open. Brenda herself walked in, flanked by expensive lawyers. She'd somehow made bail. "This man is lying," she shouted. "I demand the right to respond." "Mrs. Walsh," I said calmly, "you're welcome to stay and hear the evidence." I clicked through slides showing security footage of her shredding documents, the fake 1955 agreement, audio recordings of her offering bribes. With each piece of evidence, Brenda's face grew paler. Now, here's what everyone needs to understand about property ownership. When lease payments are systematically stolen for years, Colorado law allows the property owner to reclaim all improvements. The room went silent. Every house in this subdivision was built on land belonging to my family. Since no legitimate lease payments have been made since 2005, I legally own every building in Pinnacle Ridge. Someone shouted, "You can't just steal our homes." You're absolutely right. Which is why I'm not going to. Instead, I'm offering every family the chance to purchase their lot at fair market value, $50,000 with 10-year payment plans at 3% interest. Relief swept through the room. But first, let me announce immediate changes. Effective today, monthly lease payments increase from $450 to $1,350 per household. That's market rate. However, any family that signs a purchase agreement within 30 days will pay the reduced rate of $850 monthly. Now the math worked in everyone's favor. Most families would actually pay less than they'd been paying in combined fees. But Brenda wasn't finished. She stood up, shaking with rage. "This is extortion. I built this community." That's when Agent Kim stepped forward. "Mrs. Kensington Walsh, you're under arrest for federal wire fraud, money laundering, and tax evasion." The click of handcuffs echoed through the silent room. The applause started slowly, then built until the entire room was on its feet, cheering as Brenda was escorted outside. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said as the applause died down, "this was never about revenge. It was about justice and building a real community where families can afford to live and thrive." 6 months later, Pinnacle Ridge looked completely different. The artificial perfection of Brenda's HOA dictatorship had been replaced by something genuine. Families working together to build the community they wanted. Brenda received 18 months federal sentence and was ordered to pay $2.3 million in restitution. Dennis got 6 months and permanent banishment from government positions. But their punishment wasn't the most satisfying part. 847 families had successfully signed purchase agreements for their lots. The Democratic HOA board they elected reduced fees by 60% while actually improving services. I used the settlement money to establish the Ezra Brennan Memorial Scholarship, providing college funding for local students. 23 kids received awards this year. 400 acres became a permanent nature preserve with hiking trails and wildlife observation areas. The sound of elk returning to their ancestral grazing grounds would have made grandfather proud. I opened Brennan's Honest Auto Repair in town. Word spread quickly that you could trust me not to invent problems. Apparently, basic honesty was revolutionary in the auto repair business. The annual Pinnacle Ridge Freedom Day became our biggest community celebration, marking the end of HOA corruption. This year's festival featured a dunking booth where people could pay to dunk actors dressed like corrupt HOA presidents. That I kept one reminder of the whole ordeal: grandfather's original 1952 Surveyor compass displayed on my kitchen table next to his final journal entry. Someday someone will make this right. Every morning I read those words and remembered that justice sometimes takes decades, but it's always worth the fight. Thanks for watching. If this story had you cheering, hit like, drop a comment, and subscribe for the next HOA tale where Karens meet their match.